The old observatory floated in the eternal darkness between stars. It was a small place, forgotten by most of the galaxy. Its walls were covered with screens that showed distant worlds, and its halls were empty except for the soft hum of ancient machines. This was Station 12, built 3,000 years ago for one simple purpose: to watch the young species on the third planet of an unremarkable yellow star. To watch humanity. Observer Thalvex had spent 400 years at this post. His species, the Kithrani, lived for many centuries, and they were known throughout the Galactic Concord for their patience and wisdom. Thalvex had gray skin that shifted colors with his emotions, and two hearts that beat slowly in his narrow chest. He had watched humanity since they first split the atom. He had watched them walk on their moon. He had watched them send tiny machines into the darkness of space. And he had watched them kill each other in wars that burned their cities to ash. The Galactic Concord was an alliance of 142 species. They had rules. They had laws. And their oldest law was simple: do not contact primitive species. Let them grow on their own. Let them prove they deserve to join the stars. Most species never made it. They destroyed themselves with weapons, or pollution, or hate. In the long history of the galaxy, the Concord had watched 47 species rise from their birth worlds, reach for the stars, and then fall back into darkness forever. The universe was not kind to the young. Thalvex had always believed humanity would be number 48. They were so violent, so angry, so divided. They fought over land, over resources, over ideas, over things that seemed meaningless to an outside observer. They built weapons that could crack their own world in half. They poisoned their own air and water. They seemed determined to end themselves. But decades passed, then centuries, and humanity did not die. Thalvex watched as they stumbled and fell and rose again. He watched them fight terrible wars and then build beautiful things from the ashes. He watched them cure diseases and feed their hungry, and reach out into their own solar system with shaking hands. They were messy and chaotic and loud, but they refused to give up. Still, the Concord's orders were clear: do not make contact. Watch and wait. If humanity survived long enough, if they proved themselves worthy, then perhaps one day they would be welcomed into the galactic community. That day seemed very far away. On this particular morning, if morning meant anything in the endless night of space, Thalvex was reviewing his daily reports. The humans had launched another small probe toward one of their outer planets. They had built another space station in orbit around their world. Small steps, baby steps. Nothing that concerned the Concord. Then his console made a sound he had never heard before. It was an alarm, but not one of the standard warnings. This was something deeper. Something built into the station's oldest systems. Thalvex's gray skin flushed blue with confusion as he pulled up the alert. The message was simple: anomaly detected in Sector Sol. He ran the scan again. Then, again. His two hearts began to beat faster. Something was moving in the outer edges of humanity's solar system. Something massive. The station's sensors, old as they were, could barely comprehend what they were seeing. At first, Thalvex thought it must be an asteroid. Then he thought it must be an error. Then the object sent out a signal, and Thalvex realized it was neither. It was a ship. His hands trembled as he enhanced the image. The object emerged from the cloud of ice and rock at the edge of humanity's system, like a beast rising from deep water. It was vast beyond reason. Conquered dreadnoughts, the largest warships in the known galaxy, measured perhaps 2 kilometers from bow to stern. They were considered monsters of engineering. This ship was 19 kilometers long. Thalvex stared at the screen. His skin had gone completely white, the Kithrani color of fear. The ship's hull was made of materials his database could not identify. Its engines burned with a light that seemed almost alive. And along its bow, carved in letters so large they could be seen from orbit, was a word in every known galactic language: Atlas. For a long moment, Thalvex could not move, could not think, could not breathe. The humans had built a Titan. His training took over. His fingers moved across the console, sending priority alerts to Concord High Command. Within minutes, every major government in the galaxy would know what he had just seen. Within hours, the entire galactic community would be asking the same impossible question. How? How had humanity done this? They were supposed to be primitives. They were supposed to be decades or centuries away from true interstellar capability. The Concord had watched them carefully, monitored their progress, calculated their development with mathematical precision. They should not have been able to build this ship, but they had. Thalvex thought about all the years he had spent watching humanity. All the times he had dismissed them as violent children, playing with dangerous toys. All the times he had assumed they would destroy themselves before they ever reached the stars. He had been wrong. They had all been wrong. The alerts began flooding in from across the galaxy. Other stations had detected the ship. Other observers were seeing what he was seeing. The Concord's communication channels exploded with traffic as admirals and diplomats and scientists all tried to understand the impossible. On the warrior world of Drexvol, General Krathmok studied the sensor readings with his one remaining eye. His species were conquerors, proud and fierce, and they had not lost a war in 1,000 years. Looking at the human ship, he felt something he had not felt since he was a young soldier facing his first battle. He felt small. On the water world of Thesson, the Council of Tides gathered in their underwater chambers to discuss the news. The Thessani were peaceful traders who had not built a warship in centuries. They looked at the images of the Atlas and wondered if peace was about to become much more expensive. On 100 other worlds, the reaction was the same. Shock, fear, and a growing sense that everything was about to change. High Arbiter Silmoran received the news in his private chambers on the Concord capital world. He was old, even by the standards of his long-lived species. He had served the Concord for over 2,000 years. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had negotiated treaties and ended wars. He had thought he had seen everything the galaxy had to offer. He had never seen anything like this. Silmoran's aide brought him report after report as more information came in. The human ship was not alone. It was escorted by smaller vessels, each one larger than any ship humanity had ever built before. Together, they formed a fleet that was advancing toward Concord space at a speed that should have been impossible. The humans had hidden this. For how long? They had built in secret, developed technologies that the Concord had never detected. And now they were revealing themselves to the galaxy on their own terms. It was, Silmoran realized, a masterful move. If humanity had tried to build their empire slowly, the Concord would have noticed. They would have intervened. They would have found ways to slow human development, to keep them contained until they could be properly evaluated and controlled. Instead, the humans had waited until they were ready, and then they had announced their presence in a way that could not be ignored or dismissed. "Summon the War Council," Silmoran said quietly, "and prepare the fleet." Across the Concord, military forces began to mobilize. Ships that had been sleeping in their docks for centuries were brought back to life. Soldiers who had never known real war were called to duty. The galaxy had been at peace for a long time. But peace was a fragile thing. And now something new was coming. Back on Station 12, Thalvex continued to watch. The Atlas moved with a grace that seemed wrong for something so massive. It did not hurry. It did not try to hide. It simply moved forward, steady and unstoppable, like a force of nature. As he watched, a transmission began to broadcast from the human ship. It was not directed at any specific target. It was an open signal, meant to be heard by anyone with the equipment to receive it. A human voice spoke. It was calm and clear. Translated into every major galactic language. "We are the crew of the Terran Confederation ship Atlas. We represent the people of Earth and humanity's colonies throughout the Sol system. For 300 years, we have known that we are not alone in the universe. We have heard your signals. We have detected your ships watching us from the darkness. We have known about the Galactic Concord since before many of you realized we were listening. Thalvex's skin flickered through a dozen colors. They had known. All this time, they had known they were being watched. The transmission continued. You chose not to speak to us. You chose to watch and wait, perhaps hoping we would destroy ourselves and save you the trouble of deciding what to do with us. We understand. We have read our own history. We know what we are capable of. But we are also capable of more than destruction. We have learned. We have grown. We have built. And now, we are ready to take our place among the stars. We do not ask for permission. We do not beg for acceptance. We simply inform you that we are here, and we are not going away. The Atlas will arrive at the border of Concord space in 72 hours. We hope to be met with words rather than weapons, but we are prepared for either. The transmission ended. Thalvex sat in silence for a long time. In 400 years of watching humanity, he had never once imagined this moment. He had never dreamed that the violent, divided species on that little blue world would one day send a message like this to the entire galaxy. They were not asking for help. They were not begging for mercy. They were simply stating a fact. They existed, and they intended to keep existing whether the Concord liked it or not. It was terrifying. It was arrogant. And somehow, in a way that Thalvex could not quite explain, it was magnificent. He thought about all the species the Concord had watched rise and fall. All the civilizations that had burned themselves out before they could reach the stars. They had all failed for the same reason. They could not overcome their own worst nature. But humanity was different. They had seen their worst nature. They had lived through it. They had survived wars and plagues and disasters that should have ended them a dozen times over. And each time, they had crawled back from the brink and kept going. They were survivors. And now, they wanted the galaxy to know it. Thalvex made a decision. It went against every protocol he had been trained to follow. It violated centuries of Concord policy. But he did it, anyway. He opened a private channel, encrypted and untraceable, and sent a single message toward the human fleet. Welcome. We should have said that a long time ago. He did not know if anyone would receive it. He did not know if it would matter. But after 400 years of silence, he felt that someone should say the words. The screens around him continued to glow with images of the Atlas as it moved steadily toward the border. In 72 hours, humanity would arrive at the edge of Concord space. In 72 hours, the galaxy would have to decide what to do about the species it had dismissed as violent children. Thalvex had a feeling that whatever happened next would change everything. The universe was about to get a lot more interesting. He watched the ship grow larger on his screens. And for the first time in centuries, he felt something he had almost forgotten. Hope. Perhaps humanity would not be the 48th species to fall. Perhaps they would be something new. Something the galaxy had never seen before. Or perhaps they would burn everything down. Either way, Thalvex intended to be watching. The silent centuries were over. The moment of contact was coming, and whether the galaxy was ready or not, humanity had arrived. Captain Yuki Tanaka stood on the bridge of the Atlas and watched the stars slide past the massive observation windows. She was a small woman, barely 5 feet tall, with short black hair that was turning gray at the temples. Her uniform was simple and worn, the kind of clothing that had seen 1,000 shifts and 100,000 cups of coffee. She did not look like someone who commanded the largest warship in human history. That was exactly how she wanted it. Around her, the bridge hummed with activity. Over 200 crew members worked at their stations, monitoring systems that governed every aspect of the ship's operation. The Atlas was not just a warship, it was a city. 3 million people called it home. Soldiers and scientists, engineers and artists, teachers and children. They had families aboard. They had schools, and hospitals, and parks, and restaurants. Humanity had not sent a weapon to meet the galaxy. They had sent a civilization. Lieutenant Commander James Chen approached Tanaka's position near the main viewport. He was her executive officer, a tall man with a serious face and eyes that missed nothing. He had served with Tanaka for 15 years, and he knew her moods better than anyone. 70 hours until we reach the border, he said. Long-range sensors are detecting significant fleet movement in Concord space. Tanaka nodded slowly. She had expected this. How many ships? Current count is 312. More arriving every hour. 300 ships. Each one crewed by beings who had never met a human, who knew nothing about humanity, except whatever their intelligence services had gathered from centuries of distant observation. They would be scared. They would be angry. They would be looking for any excuse to open fire. Tanaka understood. She would feel the same way in their position. Any communication attempts? She asked. None directed at us. But we're intercepting a lot of traffic between their ships. Our translation systems are working overtime. Chen paused. They're arguing about what to do with us, Captain. Some want to attack. Some want to talk. And some want to pretend we don't exist. And hope we go away. Tanaka almost smiled. That sounds familiar. She thought about the debates that had raged on Earth before this mission launched. The same arguments had divided humanity. Attack first, talk first, or hide, and hope for the best. It had taken decades of discussion and compromise to settle on this approach. Send one ship, but make it a ship that could not be ignored. Carry weapons, but do not fire first. Extend a hand, but make sure that hand was strong enough to make a fist if needed. It was a gamble. Everything about this mission was a gamble. The Atlas had been under construction for over a century. It had begun as a dream, a sketch on paper, an impossible idea that refused to die. Generation after generation of engineers and scientists had worked on it, each one building on the work of those who came before. Many of them had died of old age before the ship was finished. They had never seen their creation take flight, but they had believed in it. They had believed that one day, humanity would need to speak to the galaxy, and when that day came, they wanted humanity to speak from a position of strength. Tanaka had been chosen to command the Atlas because she believed in balance. She was a warrior who hated war. She was a leader who listened more than she spoke. She understood that strength without wisdom was just brutality, and wisdom without strength was just weakness. The galaxy would see both today. Captain, another officer called from across the bridge. We're receiving a transmission. It's encrypted, but our systems broke it almost immediately. It appears to be from an observation station on the edge of Concord space. Tanaka raised an eyebrow. What does it say? The officer looked confused. It says, "Welcome." We should have said that a long time ago. The bridge fell silent. Tanaka felt something shift in her chest, a knot of tension that had been there so long she had forgotten it existed. Someone out there was glad to see them. Can we trace the source? She asked. Already done. It came from a small monitoring station, designated 12. Registry says it's a Kathrani observation post. Been there for about 3,000 years. 3,000 years. They had been watching humanity for 3,000 years. And in all that time, no one had ever said hello. Until now. Log the transmission, Tanaka said. But do not respond. Not yet. Let them wonder. If we received it. Chen nodded approvingly. In diplomacy, as in war, information was power. The less the Concord knew about what humanity knew, the better. Far across the darkness of space, the Concord fleet was gathering at the border. Ships of every size and shape arrived from 100 different worlds, each one carrying warriors who had trained for conflicts that never came. The Concord had been at peace for so long that many of its soldiers had never fired a weapon in anger. That was about to change. Aboard the flagship, a vessel called the Eternal Dawn, High Arbiter Silmoran convened a war council. The chamber was vast and circular, designed to give every species an equal voice. Representatives from dozens of worlds sat in tiered seats that rose toward a domed ceiling painted with maps of the galaxy. Silmoran stood at the center, his ancient body supported by a walking frame that hummed with quiet technology. He was one of the oldest beings in the Concord, and he had earned his position through centuries of wisdom and service. When he spoke, others listened. "We have confirmed the sensor data," he said, his voice carrying easily to every corner of the chamber. "The human vessel designated Atlas is real. It is approaching our border at a speed we did not believe their technology could achieve, and it is accompanied by an escort fleet of considerable size." General Krathmok, the one-eyed warrior from Drex Vol, leaned forward in his seat. His species were among the most aggressive in the Concord, but they also valued strength in others. How did they build it? How did we miss this? "Those questions will be answered in time," Silmoran replied. "What matters now is what we do when they arrive." "We destroy them," said Admiral Thesk, a serpentine creature from the water world of Thessan. "Before they can build more, before they become a threat, we cannot contain." "And if they truly come in peace?" asked another voice. This was Velani, a young Kithrani who served as a communications specialist. She was far too junior to be speaking at a war council, but something about the human transmission had stirred something in her. Their message said they want to talk. Their message was a warning. Thesk hissed. "They told us to meet them with words or weapons. That is not the language of peace. That is the language of conquest." "No," Krathmok said, surprising everyone. "That is the language of survivors." The chamber fell quiet. The old general continued, "I have fought many wars. I have seen many enemies, and I know the difference between a species that wants to conquer and a species that simply refuses to be conquered. The humans did not build that ship to attack us. They built it to make sure we could not attack them." "You cannot know that," Thesk argued. "I know warriors," Krathmok replied. "And everything about that ship tells me these humans expect to be attacked. Every design choice, every defensive system, every piece of armor. They built a fortress, not a sword. A species planning conquest would have built something very different." Silmoran raised a hand for silence. "General Krathmok makes an important point. We have watched humanity for many centuries. We know their history. We know their capacity for violence. But we also know something else." He pressed a control, and images appeared in the air above them. Images of human cities, of human art, of human children playing in parks, images of hospitals and schools, and scientific laboratories, images of humans helping each other after disasters, rebuilding what had been destroyed. "They are capable of great destruction," Silmoran said. "But they are also capable of great creation. And in the end, they chose to create. The ship coming toward us carries 3 million people. Families, children, scientists. If humanity wanted war, they would not have sent their best and brightest directly into our weapons range." "Or they are fools," Thesk muttered. "Perhaps," Silmoran agreed. "But I do not think so. I think they know exactly what they are doing. They are showing us who they are. All of who they are. The warriors and the dreamers. The fighters and the builders. And they are asking us to decide. Will we be enemies, or will we be something else?" The council erupted into argument. Dozens of voices spoke at once, each one pushing their own agenda. Some wanted immediate attack. Some wanted to wait and observe. Some wanted to flee. Through it all, young Velani sat quietly, thinking about the human message she had heard. She thought about the voice of the human captain, calm and clear, speaking to the entire galaxy at once. There had been no fear in that voice. No hatred. Just a simple statement of fact. We are here, and we are not going away. 1. It reminded her of something her grandmother had once told her about the early days of her own species. Before the Kithrani joined the Concord, they had been alone and afraid, surrounded by vast empires that could have crushed them at any moment. They had survived by being clever and careful, and by never showing weakness. The humans were doing the same thing. They were young and alone and surrounded by powers beyond their understanding, and they were refusing to show fear. Vellani respected that more than she could say. Back on the Atlas, Captain Tanaka had retired to her private quarters. The room was small and simple, decorated with photographs of Earth and a few personal items she had carried with her across the stars. She sat at her desk, looking at a picture of her daughter, who was sleeping safely in the family quarters 3 decks below. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her shoulders. 3 million lives depended on her decisions. The entire future of humanity might be shaped by what happened in the next 70 hours. Her console chimed. A message from Commander Chen. The Concorde fleet had finished assembling. Over 400 ships now waited at the border, their weapons armed, their crews ready. They had formed a blockade that stretched across the entire sector. They were not hiding their intentions. They wanted humanity to see the wall of steel and fire that waited for them. Tanaka looked at the tactical display for a long moment. 400 ships against the Atlas, and her escort fleet of 12. The numbers were not in humanity's favor. But numbers did not tell the whole story. She opened a channel to the ship's chief engineer. Dr. Okonkwo. Status report on the main systems. The response came immediately. All systems operating at optimal capacity, Captain. The Atlas is ready for whatever comes. Good, keep it that way. She closed the channel and turned back to the viewport. The stars looked the same as they had always looked. Distant, cold, beautiful. Humans had dreamed of reaching them for thousands of years. They had written stories about them, painted pictures of them, sent prayers to them in the night. Now they were here, and the galaxy was not sure whether to welcome them or destroy them. Tanaka understood. She really did. If an alien ship had appeared over Earth a century ago, humanity would have reacted the same way. Fear was natural. Aggression was natural. The desire to destroy what you did not understand was written into the DNA of every species that had ever survived the harsh process of evolution. But so was the desire to reach out, to connect, to find others like yourself in the vast emptiness of existence. Humanity was capable of both, so was the Concorde. Tanaka made her decision. She returned to the bridge and took her position at the command chair. The crew looked up at her, waiting for orders. She could see the tension in their faces, the fear they were trying to hide. In 68 hours, we will reach the border of Concorde space, she said, her voice carrying to every station on the bridge. We will be met by the largest military force ever assembled in this region of the galaxy. They will point their weapons at us and wait to see what we do. She paused, looking at each face in turn. We will not fire first. We will not show aggression. We will not give them any excuse to attack us. But we will also not turn back. We will not apologize for existing. We will not beg for permission to take our place among the stars. She stood up from her chair and walked toward the main viewport. Our ancestors dreamed of this moment for 10,000 years. They looked up at the night sky and wondered if anyone else was out there. Now we know the answer. There are hundreds of species in this galaxy, and they have been watching us for longer than we knew. They have seen our wars and our cruelty and our worst moments. But they have also seen our art, our music, our love for each other. They have seen everything we are. She turned back to face her crew. Now it is time for them to meet us face to face, and when they do, I want them to see humanity at its best. Proud, but not arrogant. Strong, but not aggressive. Ready for war, but hoping for peace. The bridge was silent. Then, slowly, the crew began to stand. One by one, they rose from their stations and faced their captain. We are the Atlas, Tanaka said. We carry 3 million souls and 10,000 years of human dreams. Let us show the galaxy what that means. The ship continued its journey toward the border. The stars continued their eternal dance. And somewhere in the darkness, 400 alien warships waited to see what humanity would do. The moment of contact was coming, and nothing would ever be the same. The Atlas stopped. After days of steady travel, the great ship slowed its engines and came to rest exactly 1 light minute from the border of Concord space. It hung there in the darkness like a mountain floating among the stars, its hull gleaming with reflected starlight, its running lights blinking in patterns that meant nothing to the aliens watching from the other side. Captain Tanaka stood at the main viewport, her hands clasped behind her back. Through the reinforced glass, she could see the Concord fleet arranged in perfect formation across the border. 437 ships, according to the latest count. Their weapons were hot. Their shields were raised. They were ready for war. Behind her, the bridge crew worked in tense silence. Every system on the ship was operating at peak efficiency. Every weapon was loaded and ready. Every pilot in the hangar bays sat in their fighter, waiting for the order to launch. But that order would not come. Not unless the Concorde fired first. Status of the escort fleet? Tanaka asked. Commander Chen checked his display. All 12 ships in defensive formation around the Atlas. Shields at maximum. Weapons armed, but not powered. Tanaka nodded. The distinction was important. Armed weapons were ready. Powered weapons were a threat. She wanted the Concorde to see strength, not aggression. Open a channel, she said. All frequencies, all languages. I want everyone in the galaxy to hear what I'm about to say. The communications officer, a young woman named Lieutenant Park, hesitated for just a moment. Then she began working her console, fingers flying across the controls. Channel open, Captain. Broadcasting on all standard frequencies, plus every alien channel we've been able to identify. Translation systems are active. Tanaka took a deep breath. This was it. This was the moment that would define everything that came after. She had practiced this speech 100 times, but now that the moment had arrived, the prepared words felt wrong. Too formal. Too political. She was not a diplomat, she was a ship captain, and she decided to speak like one. This is Captain Yuki Tanaka of the Terran Confederation ship Atlas. I am speaking to everyone who can hear my voice. The Galactic Concorde, the independent worlds, anyone else who might be listening. I am speaking to you as one person to another, across the vast distances that separate us. She paused, gathering her thoughts. We are humanity. We come from a small blue world that orbits a yellow star in an unfashionable corner of this galaxy. For most of our history, we looked up at the night sky and wondered if we were alone. We sent radio signals into the darkness and waited for answers that never came. We built telescopes and probes and dreamed of the day we might meet other minds among the stars. On the Concorde flagship, High Arbiter Silmaran watched the transmission on his private screen. Around him, his advisors whispered and argued, but he held up a hand for silence. He wanted to hear what the human had to say. Tanaka continued, 300 years ago, we learned that we were not alone. We detected your signals, your ships, your probes watching us from the outer edges of our solar system. We realized that the galaxy was full of life, and that life had been watching us for a very long time. Her voice hardened slightly. You chose not to speak to us. You watched and waited, perhaps hoping we would destroy ourselves and save you the trouble of making a decision about us. We understand. We have read our own history. We know what we have done to each other. Wars that killed millions. Weapons that could crack our own world in half. Hatred and cruelty and violence that seemed to have no end. On 100 different worlds, billions of beings watched the broadcast. On Drexval, warriors paused their training to listen. On Thesson, merchants stopped their trading to watch. On Caithron, children sat in their classrooms as teachers played the transmission on every screen. The galaxy was listening. You were not wrong to fear us, Tanaka said. We have been capable of terrible things. But you were wrong to think that was all we were capable of. You saw our wars. But did you see the peace we built afterward? You saw our weapons. But did you see the hands that reached out to help the wounded? You saw our hatred. But did you see the love that survived it? She stepped closer to the viewport, looking out at the wall of alien ships that waited to destroy her if she made the wrong move. We are not perfect. We have never claimed to be. But we have learned from our mistakes. We have grown. We have changed. And we have refused, again and again, to let our worst nature define us. On the Atlas's bridge, the crew watched their captain with a mixture of pride and fear. Lieutenant Park wiped tears from her eyes, her hands still steady on her console. Commander Chen stood at attention, his face unreadable but his eyes bright. We built this ship not to conquer you, Tanaka said. We built it to prove that we could. We built it to show you that the species you dismissed as violent children has grown up. We are ready to take our place among the stars, not as beggars asking for scraps, but as equals, seeking fellowship. She paused again, and when she spoke next, her voice was softer. We do not ask for your permission. We do not need your approval, but we do hope for your friendship. We have so much to learn from you. We hope you might learn something from us as well. We have survived things that should have destroyed us. We have found hope in the darkest places. We have built beauty from the ashes of our own destruction. These are gifts we would gladly share. In the council chamber of the Eternal Dawn, the representatives of 100 species watched in stunned silence. Admiral Thesk's scales had shifted to a pale color that indicated confusion. General Krathmok was nodding slowly, a look of respect on his scarred face. Young Velani sat at her communication station, her twin hearts beating so fast she could barely breathe. Tanaka raised her chin. This ship will remain at this position. We will not cross the border unless we are invited. We will not fire unless we are fired upon. We will wait here as long as it takes for you to decide what kind of galaxy you want to live in. A galaxy of fear and isolation, where every species watches every other with suspicion and hatred, or a galaxy of connection and growth, where different minds work together to build something greater than any of them could build alone. She let the question hang in the air. The choice is yours. We have already made ours. We are here. We are not going away. And we are ready to begin. The transmission ended. For a long moment, nothing happened. The Atlas hung motionless in space. The Concorde fleet remained in formation. The entire galaxy seemed to hold its breath, waiting for someone to make the next move. On the Eternal Dawn, the Council erupted into chaos. A dozen voices spoke at once, arguing about what to do. Some demanded an immediate attack before humanity could bring more ships. Others counseled patience and observation. Still, others suggested ignoring the humans entirely and hoping they would eventually go away. High Arbiter Silmoran listened to it all without speaking. He had lived for over 2,000 years. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had negotiated treaties with species that had been at war for centuries, but he had never seen anything quite like this. The human captain had not begged or threatened. She had not made demands or offered bribes. She had simply stated who her people were and what they wanted, and she had done it with a dignity that Silmoran found genuinely impressive. Silence, he said finally, his voice cutting through the noise. The chamber quieted. The humans have made their position clear, Silmoran said. They are waiting for our response. What shall we tell them? Admiral Thesk slithered forward. We tell them nothing. We let them wait. Every hour they spend sitting at that border is an hour we have to prepare our defenses, to call more ships, to develop countermeasures against their technology. And if they interpret our silence as rejection? Krathmok asked. Then they will learn that the Concorde is not intimidated by their giant ship. Or, another voice said, they will conclude that we are afraid of them. Everyone turned to look at the speaker. It was Velani, the young communications officer. Her gray skin had flushed blue with embarrassment at speaking out of turn, but she did not back down. "I beg your pardon, young one," Thesk hissed. Velani swallowed hard but continued. The human captain spoke about silence. She said, "Humanity has listened to our silence for 300 years. Every year we did not speak to them was a year that told them they were not welcome. If we remain silent now, we are sending the same message. Ong day, 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 ong day. Perhaps that is the message we wish to send," Thesk said coldly. "Is it?" Velani asked. She turned to face the council. "I have studied the human transmissions. All of them. Going back centuries. I have heard their music and their stories and their cries for help that we never answered. They are not monsters. They are frightened children who have finally grown strong enough to demand our attention. You are young," Thesk said. "You do not understand the dangers." "I understand enough," Velani replied. "I understand that the Concord was built on the principle that different species could work together for the common good. I understand that we have spent 3,000 years watching humanity struggle and suffer and die, and we never once offered to help. I understand that we are afraid of them because they remind us of ourselves." The chamber went very quiet. "Every species in this room was young once," Velani continued. "Every species in this room had to prove that they were worthy of joining the galactic community. We were all given a chance. Why should humanity be different?" Silmoran watched the young officer with newfound interest. She had courage. This one. And she was saying things that needed to be said. "What would you have us do?" he asked. Velani straightened. "Respond to them. Not with weapons or threats, but with words. Simple words. Tell them that we heard their message. Tell them that we are willing to talk. And if they interpret that as weakness?" Thesk demanded. "Then we will have learned something about them," Velani said. "But I do not think they will. The captain who made that transmission was not looking for weakness to exploit. She was looking for common ground to build on." The council dissolved into argument again. But this time, the tone was different. Velani's words had shifted something. The pure fear was fading, replaced by something more complicated. Curiosity, perhaps. Or the beginning of hope. In the end, it was Silmoran who made the decision. As High Arbiter, he had the authority to act in the Concord's name during emergencies. And this was certainly an emergency. "Young Velani," he said, "you will send a response to the human ship." The chamber fell silent again. Velani's skin went pale with shock. "Me, High Arbiter? Surely someone more senior." "You spoke well," Silmoran said. "You understood what the humans were trying to say. I believe you can help them understand us. Send a simple message. Nothing official, nothing formal, just a greeting. One person to another, across the vast distances that separate us." Velani nodded slowly. Her hands trembled as she turned to her console. She thought about all the things she could say, all the diplomatic phrases she had been trained to use. But in the end, she decided to speak from the heart. She opened a channel to the Atlas and said 3 words. "Hello." On the bridge of the Atlas, the words appeared on Lieutenant Park's screen. She read them twice, not quite believing what she was seeing. Then, she turned to Captain Tanaka. "Captain, we're receiving a response. It's from the Concord flagship. It says, 'Hello. We were afraid.'" Tanaka stared at the screen for a long moment. Then, slowly, a smile spread across her face. It was not a treaty. It was not a formal acceptance. It was just 3 words from a stranger on the other side of an invisible line. But it was a beginning. "Send a reply," Tanaka said. "Tell them, thank you for listening. We were afraid too." The message flew across the darkness, from ship to ship, from species to species. On 100 worlds, Beings who had never seen a human watched the exchange with wonder. After 300 years of silence, after centuries of watching and waiting and fear, someone had finally said, "Hello." The ice was beginning to crack, and somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, hope was starting to grow. The neutral station was built in 3 days. Both sides had agreed that the first face-to-face meeting should take place on territory that belonged to neither humanity nor the Concord. Engineers from a dozen species worked alongside human construction teams to create a small structure floating in the empty space between the two fleets. It was ugly and functional, a collection of metal boxes connected by tubes and cables, but it served its purpose. Inside, there was a single large room with a table and chairs. The walls were bare metal. The lights hummed with an uneven electrical buzz. It smelled of fresh paint and recycled air. Captain Yuki Tanaka arrived first. She wore her dress uniform, cleaned and pressed for the occasion, with her medals arranged neatly on her chest. She had spent 30 years in the service, fought in 3 wars, and commanded ships ranging from small patrol boats to the largest vessel ever built by human hands. None of that had prepared her for this moment. She brought a small team with her: Commander Chen, Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, the ship's chief engineer, and Ambassador Michael Reeves, a career diplomat who had spent his entire life preparing for a meeting that everyone assumed would never happen. They also brought gifts. Tanaka had insisted on this. She wanted the aliens to understand that humanity had come to give, not just to take. The Concord delegation arrived shortly after. High Arbiter Sil Moran led the group, his ancient body supported by his mechanical walking frame. Behind him came General Krathmok, his one eye scanning the room for threats, and Admiral Thesk, whose serpentine body coiled into a sitting position that somehow managed to look disapproving. A dozen other representatives filled the remaining seats, each one the leader or spokesperson for a different species. And at the back of the group, trying to look invisible, was young Velani. Sil Moran had insisted that she attend. After her unexpected response to the human transmission, he believed she might have insights that more experienced diplomats would miss. For a long moment, the two sides simply looked at each other. It was the first time any of them had seen a member of the other group in person. Screens and transmissions were one thing. Physical presence was something else entirely. Tanaka studied the aliens with undisguised curiosity. Sil Moran was tall and thin, with skin that seemed to shift between different shades of silver. Krathmok was built like a tank, covered in scales and scars, with arms that looked strong enough to crush steel. Thesk was almost serpentine, with no visible legs and a face that was difficult to read. They were strange. They were beautiful. They were real. Sil Moran broke the silence. "Captain Tanaka, on behalf of the Galactic Concord, I welcome you to this meeting. It has been a long time coming." Tanaka nodded. "High Arbiter Sil Moran, on behalf of humanity, I thank you for agreeing to speak with us. We have waited even longer." There was a pause. Neither side seemed sure what to say next. Ambassador Reeves stepped forward. He had prepared extensive briefing materials, diplomatic protocols, and carefully worded proposals. But before he could speak, Tanaka held up a hand. "Before we begin the formal discussions," she said, "we brought something for you." She gestured to Commander Chen, who placed a small box on the table. Tanaka opened it and began removing items one by one. "These are seeds from our homeworld," she said, placing a small container on the table. "Wheat, rice, corn, and dozens of other crops that have fed humanity for thousands of years. We do not know if they will grow on your worlds, but we offer them as a symbol of the life we hope to share." The aliens watched in silence as she continued. "This is a collection of our music." She placed a small device on the table. Over 10,000 years of human songs, from the earliest drums our ancestors beat around their fires to the symphonies our greatest composers wrote last year. Music is how we express what words cannot capture. We hope you will listen." General Krathmok leaned forward, his one eye fixed on the device with something that might have been curiosity. Tanaka reached into the box again. This was drawn by a child aboard the Atlas. She unfolded a piece of paper and held it up. It showed a crude but enthusiastic drawing of a human and a strange alien creature holding hands under a sky full of stars. Her name is Emma. She is 7 years old. When we asked her to draw what she thought aliens might look like, she drew this. She asked me to tell you that she wants to be friends. Velani's twin hearts squeezed painfully in her chest. She had spent her entire career studying human transmissions, analyzing their behavior from a distance. But nothing had prepared her for this. A child's drawing. A simple hope for friendship. Finally, Tanaka placed a bottle on the table. It was made of dark glass and contained a deep red liquid. "This is wine," she said. "It was made from grapes, grown in a vineyard that has survived 3 world wars. Every time our ancestors destroyed each other, the people who tended this vineyard replanted and rebuilt. Every bottle they produce is proof that we can survive our own worst nature." She stepped back from the table. "We did not bring weapons. We did not bring demands. We brought seeds and songs, and children's drawings and wine. We brought the things that make us who we are. We hope you will accept them in the spirit they are offered." For a long moment, no one spoke. The alien representatives looked at the items on the table as if they were not sure whether to be touched or suspicious. It was Admiral Thesk who broke the silence. His voice was cold and sharp. "This is very moving, Captain. But I notice you did not mention the 19-kilometer warship floating a few light minutes from here. The one with weapons that could destroy entire planets. Is that also a gift you bring in the spirit of friendship?" The tension in the room increased immediately. Ambassador Reeves started to respond, but Tanaka shook her head. "A fair question," she said, "and it deserves an honest answer." She walked to the table and sat down across from the alien delegation. Her posture was relaxed, but her eyes were serious. "We built the Atlas because we were afraid," she said simply. "We knew you were watching us. We knew you had chosen not to make contact. And we could not know why. Perhaps you were waiting to see if we were worthy. Perhaps you were waiting for us to destroy ourselves. Perhaps you were simply not interested in talking to primitives." She shrugged. "Whatever the reason, we understood one thing clearly. When we finally came to meet you, we needed to be strong enough that you would have to take us seriously. If we had arrived in small ships, you could have ignored us. If we had arrived with weak weapons, you could have threatened us into submission. We could not allow that to happen." Krathmok nodded slowly. Tanaka noticed and continued. "The Atlas is not a threat. It is a statement. It says, we are here, we are capable, and we will not be dismissed. It says, if you want peace, we are ready for peace. If you want war, we are ready for war. It says, the choice is yours, but we are no longer helpless." She looked directly at Silmoran. "You have watched us for 3,000 years. You have seen our wars. You know what we can do when we are pushed too hard. The Atlas is our way of ensuring that no one pushes us too hard. It is not aggression, it is protection." Silmoran considered this for a long moment. His face was difficult to read, but there was something in his eyes that might have been understanding. "You are saying that you brought a weapon to a peace meeting because you did not trust us to offer peace," he said. "I am saying that we brought a weapon to a peace meeting because we did not trust anyone to offer peace unless we could defend ourselves," Tanaka corrected. "We have learned that lesson the hard way. Many times over. The meek are not blessed with inheritance. They are blessed with extinction." Thesk made a sound that might have been disgust. "And now, you lecture us about survival? Your species is barely out of its cradle. What could you possibly know about the challenges of existing in this galaxy?" Tanaka smiled, but there was no humor in it. "We know that the universe does not care about good intentions. We know that strength without wisdom is brutality. But wisdom without strength is just a longer path to the same grave. We know that every species that has ever survived has done so by being smart enough to avoid fights and strong enough to win them when they could not be avoided. She gestured at the items on the table. That is why we brought both gifts and guns. That is why we offer friendship while standing on the deck of the most powerful ship ever built. That is why we extend our hand while keeping our sword ready, because we have learned that the best way to ensure peace is to be prepared for war. The room was silent. Tanaka could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on everyone. This was the turning point. Either the aliens would understand what she was trying to say, or they would decide that humanity was too dangerous to tolerate. It was Velani who spoke first. Her voice was quiet, but it carried clearly in the silent room. On my world, she said, we have a saying, the tree that bends in the wind survives, but the tree that cannot stand straight will never grow tall. Everyone turned to look at her. Her gray skin flushed blue with embarrassment, but she continued. Captain Tanaka is right. Strength without wisdom is dangerous, but weakness is not virtue. It is simply weakness. Humanity has shown us both their strength and their wisdom today. They brought a weapon because they were afraid, but they chose not to use it. They offered gifts because they hope for friendship, even though they know friendship is not guaranteed. She looked at her own leaders. Is that not exactly what the Concord has done for millennia? We built the largest military alliance in the galaxy because we were afraid. We made rules and treaties and laws because we hoped for peace. We are exactly what the humans are, survivors who refuse to let fear make us cruel. Silmoran looked at the young officer with new respect. She had cut through all the politics and posturing and found the simple truth at the heart of the matter. You speak wisely, Velani, he said. Then he turned to Tanaka. Captain, I believe we have much to discuss. But perhaps we should begin with something simpler than treaties and trade agreements. He reached out and picked up the child's drawing. He studied it for a long moment, his silver skin shifting through colors that Tanaka could not interpret. On my world, he said, children draw similar pictures. Stars and aliens and dreams of meeting other minds in the darkness. Perhaps that is where we should start. With the dreams, not the fears. Tanaka felt something loosen in her chest. It was not victory. It was not surrender. It was something much more fragile and much more valuable. It was understanding. I would like that, she said. They talked for hours. Not about treaties or territory or the technical specifications of their ships. They talked about their worlds and their histories and their hopes for the future. They talked about art and music and the strange ways that different species had found to express the same universal emotions. The formal negotiations would come later. The difficult decisions about borders and trade and military cooperation would take months or years to resolve. But in that small room, floating in the darkness between two civilizations, something important had happened. A hand had been extended, and another hand had reached out to take it. When the meeting finally ended, Tanaka walked back to her shuttle with a feeling she had not expected to have. Not triumph, not relief. Just a quiet, steady hope that perhaps the universe was not as dark and cruel as she had sometimes feared. Behind her, the alien delegation watched her go. They had come expecting threats and demands. They had found something else entirely. They had found a species that was exactly like them, scared and hopeful and determined to survive. Perhaps that was enough to build on. The news spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. On 100 worlds, billions of beings watched the recordings of the first meeting between humanity and the Concord. They saw the human captain standing before the alien delegation. They heard her words about strength and wisdom, about fear and hope. They watched as she offered gifts and waited to see if the galaxy would accept them. The reactions were as varied as the species that populated the stars. On Drexval, the warrior culture found new respect for the humans. General Krathmok returned from the meeting and reported to his councils that humanity was not a threat to be destroyed, but a potential ally to be cultivated. They had earned their place at the table through strength and determination. That deserved honor, not hostility. On Thesson, the merchant guilds began calculating the potential profits of trade with human space. The species that had once seemed like dangerous primitives now looked like valuable customers. Their shipbuilding technology alone would be worth billions. On Kithron, young children asked their parents questions about the humans they had seen on their screens. Why did they look so strange? Why did they only have one heart? Did human children like to play games too? The answers were uncertain, but the questions themselves marked a shift. Humanity was no longer an abstract threat to be feared. They were real beings with children of their own. The Concord High Council debated for 3 weeks. Factions formed and dissolved, and reformed around different proposals. Some wanted to maintain the blockade and continue watching from a distance. Some wanted full diplomatic relations and open borders. Some wanted everything in between. In the end, they reached a compromise. Humanity would be recognized as a sovereign interstellar power with the right to exist and expand within certain boundaries. Trade relations would be established slowly, with careful monitoring on both sides. A permanent diplomatic mission would be created to facilitate communication between human and Concord space. It was not friendship. Not yet. But it was a beginning. High Arbiter Silmoran signed the preliminary agreement in a ceremony broadcast across the galaxy. Captain Tanaka stood beside him, representing the Terran Confederation. The document was simple and limited, more a statement of intentions than a formal treaty, but its symbolic importance was immense. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Concord had officially acknowledged that humanity had a right to exist among the stars. After the ceremony, Silmoran called young Velani to his private quarters on the Eternal Dawn. She arrived nervous and uncertain, expecting to be reprimanded for speaking out of turn during the council meetings. Instead, the ancient arbiter gestured for her to sit. "You did well," he said simply. Velani's skin flickered through several colors. "I only said what I believed, High Arbiter. That is precisely why you did well." Silmoran lowered himself into his own chair with the slow care of very old age. "Too many of my advisors say what they think I want to hear. Too many of them are afraid to speak uncomfortable truths. You showed courage when courage was needed." "I did not feel courageous," Velani admitted. "I felt terrified. I felt terrified. That is often what courage feels like." Silmoran smiled, an expression that looked strange on his alien face but was somehow recognizable. "I have decided to appoint you as the Concord's first official liaison to humanity. You will travel to their ship, the Atlas, and begin the process of building understanding between our peoples." Velani stared at him in shock. "Me? High Arbiter? Surely someone more experienced." "Experience is not always an advantage," Silmoran interrupted. "The humans are young. They are idealistic. They believe that friendship is possible, even between species that have never met. They need someone who shares that belief. Not some tired old diplomat who has forgotten how to hope." He leaned forward. "You sent the first response to their transmission. You spoke the words that cracked the ice. It seems fitting that you should continue the work you started." Velani felt her twin hearts racing. This was an honor beyond anything she had imagined. It was also a responsibility that terrified her. She would be alone among aliens, representing her entire civilization. "I will do my best, High Arbiter," she said finally. "That is all any of us can do." Meanwhile, aboard the Atlas, Captain Tanaka received news that changed everything. The transmission came from Earth, encoded with the highest security protocols available. Tanaka read it twice before she was certain she understood. Then she called her senior officers to a private meeting. "2 more Titangent-class vessels have completed construction in the Sol system," she announced. "The Prometheus and the Gaia are fully operational and ready for deployment." Commander Chen let out a long breath. "That changes the strategic situation considerably." "Yes, it does." Tanaka looked at her officers. "When we left Earth, we were humanity's only Titan. Now we are one of 3. And there are 4 more under construction at various shipyards throughout human space. The room was silent as the implications sank in. Humanity had not put all their eggs in one basket. They had not gambled everything on a single ship. While the Atlas was making first contact, human engineers had been working around the clock to build more vessels just like it. Should we inform the Concorde? Dr. Okonkwo asked. Tanaka considered the question carefully. Not yet. Let them believe the Atlas is unique for now. It will give us time to establish our diplomatic position before they realize how much stronger we actually are. It was not a lie, exactly. They had not claimed to be alone. But it was not the whole truth either. Tanaka felt the weight of that decision. But she also knew it was the right one. Trust had to be built slowly. Revealing too much, too soon, could destabilize the fragile progress they had made. Days passed. The Concorde fleet began to disperse, returning to their home ports as the immediate crisis faded. The Atlas remained at the border, a symbol of humanity's presence in galactic affairs. Trade ships began making tentative crossings, carrying goods and ideas in both directions. Velani arrived on the Atlas 3 weeks after the first meeting. She was escorted to guest quarters that had been hastily prepared for non-human visitors. The air was slightly wrong for her lungs, the gravity slightly too strong, the colors slightly too harsh. But she did not complain. This was her new home. At least for now. Captain Tanaka welcomed her personally. "I hope you will be comfortable here," Tanaka said. "We are still learning how to accommodate visitors from other species. Please tell us if anything needs to be adjusted." Velani looked around the room with wide eyes. Everything was so strange. The textures, the smells, the sounds of human voices in the corridors outside. She felt like a child visiting an alien world for the first time. Which, she supposed, was exactly what she was. "Thank you, Captain," she said. "I am sure I will adapt." Over the following weeks, Velani immersed herself in human culture. She attended ship meetings and community gatherings. She visited the schools where human children learned and the parks where families relaxed. She ate human food, which tasted strange but was not unpleasant. She listened to human music, which moved her in ways she had not expected, and she talked. Endless conversations with crew members who were curious about the alien living among them. They asked about her world, her people, her beliefs. They told her about their own families, their hopes, their fears. They shared stories and jokes and dreams. It was exhausting. It was exhilarating. It was exactly what she had hoped it would be. One evening, she found herself on an observation deck, looking out at the stars. She was alone, or so she thought, until she heard footsteps behind her. It was Captain Tanaka. "May I join you?" the human asked. Velani gestured to the space beside her. "Of course." They stood in silence for a while, watching the stars drift past. Finally, Tanaka spoke. "What do you think of us?" Really? It was such a simple question, but the answer was complicated. Velani thought carefully before responding. "I think you are remarkable," she said. "You have risen so fast, come so far. Your species did not even exist when my people first reached the stars. Now you stand among us as equals. It is impressive." Tanaka smiled. "But," Velani hesitated. "But you are also frightening. Not because of your weapons or your ships, because of your potential. We look at you, and we see what you could become. It is not easy to witness." Tanaka nodded slowly. "I understand. We frighten ourselves sometimes too." They watched the stars in silence for another long moment. Then Tanaka spoke again, her voice quieter than before. "There is something I should tell you. Something that the High Arbiter mentioned during our private conversations. Something about why the Concorde has spent so much effort watching for new species and controlling their development." Velani turned to look at her. "What do you mean?" Tanaka's face was serious. "He told me about the things in the void, the things the Concorde has been hiding from for millennia. The real reason the alliance was formed in the first place. A chill ran through Velani. She knew what Tanaka was referring to. Every child on Kithron learned the stories, though they were told as myths and legends rather than history. The Great Darkness, the Hungry Ones, the entities that lived in the spaces between stars and consumed everything they touched. Those are old stories, she said carefully. No one knows if they are true. Silmaran believes they are true, Tanaka replied. He believes the Concord has been preparing for something. Watching, waiting, building strength against a threat that might return someday. She turned to face Velani directly. He also believes that is why the Concord was so afraid of us. Not because of what we are, but because of what we represent. A wild factor. An unknown variable. A species that might disrupt all the careful preparations they have been making for thousands of years. Velani's mind raced. If this was true, if there really was something terrible waiting in the darkness beyond the known galaxy, then everything she thought she understood about the Concord was wrong. They were not arrogant overlords who looked down on younger species. They were guardians, trying to protect the galaxy from a threat no one else remembered. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Tanaka smiled, and there was something fierce in her expression. Because Silmoran also told me something else. He said that in all the centuries the Concord has existed, they have never found a species willing to stand and fight. Every civilization they have contacted has been happy to hide behind the Concord's walls and pretend the danger does not exist. She stepped closer to Velani. We are not like the others. We have spent our entire history fighting things that were bigger and stronger than us. We have faced extinction more times than we can count, and we have always found a way to survive. If there is something out there in the darkness, something that threatens all life in the galaxy, then we want to help fight it. Velani felt something stir in her chest. It was hope, she realized. The same hope she had felt when she first heard the human transmission, weeks ago. The same hope that had driven her to respond when all her training told her to stay silent. You would do that? She asked. You would fight alongside species you barely know? Against enemies you have never seen? Tanaka shrugged. We would fight to protect our home and our people. If protecting the galaxy is part of that, then yes, we would fight. She reached out and put a hand on Velani's shoulder. The touch was warm and strange and somehow comforting. We are done hiding, Tanaka said. We are done waiting to see if the universe will accept us. We are here now, and we are ready to help. The only question is whether the Concord is ready to let us. Velani looked out at the stars. Somewhere, out there, beyond the light of the known galaxy, something might be waiting. Something ancient and terrible. Something the Concord had been running from for longer than humanity had existed. But now there was a new player in the game. A species that refused to run. A species that built giant ships and named them after gods. A species that had survived everything the universe had thrown at them and kept reaching for more. Maybe that was what the galaxy had been missing. Maybe that was why Silmoran had agreed to speak with the humans when so many others wanted to destroy them. Maybe humanity was the answer to a question the Concord had been asking for millennia. I think, Velani said slowly, that things are about to change. For all of us. Tanaka smiled. I think you are right. They stood together on the observation deck, human and alien, watching the stars. Behind them, the Atlas hummed with the life of 3 million souls. Ahead of them, the galaxy stretched out in all its terrible beauty. The moment of first contact had passed. The silence had been broken. And now, for better or worse, the future was beginning to unfold. Whatever came next, they would face it together. That was the gift humanity had brought to the stars. Not their weapons or their technology or their giant ships, just a simple belief that had carried them through 10,000 years of struggle and survival. Together is better than alone. The galaxy held its breath. And somewhere in the darkness, something ancient stirred. A new age was beginning, and humanity was ready.